So our story begins with a relationship, and it's a very old relationship. It's the relationship between an acacia tree and a giraffe. Now, this particular acacia tree has a flavor that the giraffes really enjoy. So to protect itself from being overgrazed, it responds by increasing the length of its thorns. And you'll find that the parts of the tree that are eaten the most will have even longer thorns. Now, this works as a good first defense, but the giraffe really likes this tree, and it has a response too. Over time, the giraffe develops an extensively long tongue that can weave between the thorns and pluck those tasty leaves. And now that the tongue is exposed to long periods of sunlight, it develops a dark blue tone as a defense against harmful UV rays. So the challenge is on, and the acacia tree responds again. It brings in a new level of defense, tannic acid. The moment it senses the giraffe feeding on its leaves, it injects high doses of tannic acid into its plant tissue, doses that can lead to sickness and digestive issues. Within the first 2 minutes, the levels of tannic acid can increase by 70%. But that's not all. The acacia tree does something else. It sends a message to the other trees in the area. The moment it releases the tannic acid, it simultaneously gives off an ethylene gas. And this ethylene gas, this plant hormone, is picked up by the wind and carried downwind up to 50 yards, warning the other trees. And when the other trees in the area receive this alarm, they know to release tannic acid into their plant tissue also. And they do just that. So what does the giraffe do now? He has to make some adjustments. He makes a very practical adjustment, simply approaches from downwind. Now this buys it some feeding time, but the acacia isn't finished. It now recruits some helpers. It starts to produce these swollen, hollow thorns and secretes this sugary nectar at the base of its leaves, perfect habitat for ants. And the ants respond to the same ethylene gas, that same message, and they burrow and nest inside these hollow thorns, and they establish colonies. And these colonies become defenders of their new home. They get right to work. They'll take on anybody. They fight off everything from small insects to large mammals. They'll even repel plants. They'll go down to the ground looking for seedlings, eliminating any competitors they find. This special relationship started with a disturbance. And from that moment forward, the ants become defenders, tenders, and gardeners of their new home. This is a fascinating story. This is a story of relationships, of adaptability and diversity, of the interplay between living organisms. This is the essence of ecological resilience. But what else does this story tell us? Well, we live in a massive system composed of these relationships. And in it, there exist billions of eyes and ears and feet, and there are patterns and shapes and cycles, all interwoven. So we can't apply singular solutions to these complex living interactions. This is called whole systems thinking, and it is fundamental to understanding ecological resilience. Now let me ask you, how many of us see ourselves as part of these natural processes? How many of us don't? How many of us see ourselves as the ant or the giraffe? You see, we can't agree on the role we play because for the most part, it's forgotten. We've forgotten our relationship. We have forgotten that we are the tenders and gardeners of our shared home. And that we are accelerators and decelerators of these natural processes. That we can act as pollinators and propagators. We are a part of this system, and that role is our inheritance. So when we think of the word resilience, we think resistance, defiance. But they're different. Resilience implies a level of flexibility, where it can absorb disturbances. Think of the reeds that sway in the windstorm versus the tree with the stiff branches that snap off. So Eco-resilience describes the ability to absorb these disturbances while undergoing change. And a strategy is created where, over time, the damage is reduced and the recovery time is increased. This involves adaptation. Adaptation. The acacia tree absorbs the disturbance and damage caused by the giraffe, and it adapts. And it sets in motion a multi-layered strategy and a series of steps, while also establishing a symbiotic, mutualistic relationship with another species. That's high level. What else does that show us? That shows us that resilience involves multiple elements, having multiple functions, and multiple supports. These redundancies are crucial. Adaptability, redundancy. And with these two, we can maintain overall equilibrium. And with these two, we can measure the true health and success of any system. How do we absorb disturbances? How do we integrate damage? The giraffe, as a disturbance, has a role to play. It's part of the story. Without these disturbances, there wouldn't be the call to adaptation, the call to resilience. These stressors are fundamental and essential to innovation. I'm going to say that again. These stressors are essential to innovation. And what's the driving force behind all of this? What's pushing this all forward? Diversity. Adaptability is dependent on diversity. Diversity breeds diversity. Diversity of habitat is related to the diversity of the species. And it's not just about the number of species, it's about the number of connections, relationships between them. So, with this whole systems understanding, coupled with the awareness of the pattern language of nature, we can challenge the methods that are done today. We can ask why. Why are we doing it this way? You see, we only have ideas on how things are going to change, but we don't really know. We don't. But eco-resiliency solves for that by being adaptive, by having redundancies. So we can take like the acacia tree and be integrative. But that comes down to management, human management, back to us. We have the potential to be a keystone species, a species that creates conditions for biodiversity. That can be our legacy. How we relate and tend to the land is how we relate and tend to each other, and how we do so generationally. When colonial settlers first came upon fields of wildflowers, they thought they were in paradise. But that paradise wasn't the result of being untended, untouched paradise. No, it was the result of being massively tended, massively managed for millennia, managed by women with digging sticks who for millennia dug for edible roots, bulbs, corms, and rhizomes, split them, replanted, propagated, spreaded seeds for millennia, and passed it on to their children and their children's children. That is our longest human story, period. So you see, eco-resilience isn't just ecological, it's also social. And this isn't just a message for today. Resilience is successive from generation to generation. It is a dialogue with our future. And resilience is our inheritance. So, in the case of the giraffe and the acacia, their story is going to continue. They're going to keep on with their complex dynamic, doing their thing, challenging each other, adapting. How will our story continue? To quote one of my mentors, honor the principles, challenge the methods. Thank you.